Hello, my name is Brooks Kossover, and I'm an oil painter. This, for my Patreon exclusive viewers, is going to be the first lesson. Now, of course, before we get into doing any actual painting, we're gonna have to get supplies, right? I mean, you can't paint unless you have the paints. So I'm gonna let you in on my own colors that I use, as well as my own technique. But first things first, let's go ahead and get looking at some of the stuff that I want you guys to get. So, you don't necessarily have to get, see, these are the cheaper kind, and they have the kind that are even cheaper than this. I got the big tubes. If you guys are, really want to commit entirely it, you can buy the smaller tubes. Cheaper options are okay at first. You're figuring this out, and I want you guys to really love it, and I don't want you to break the bank, okay? You're already spending money on my Patreon, so I have no idea why you're doing that. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the rundown of colors that I want you to get. Cadmium red medium, cadmium yellow medium, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, Indian yellow, and titanium white baby. You're going to need a lot of this stuff. So if you don't get a big tube of anything else, get a big tube of this because it will run out fast. Anyway, as well as that, I have here just a tiny little selection of brushes. You can really buy, there's cheap artist packs. They come, there's like 10 or so brushes in them. You can get them real cheap at Blick, Art Supplies, really anywhere online, whatever works. But I would recommend getting a flat brush, kind of a larger one, a round, sort of a medium S round, a larger one too if you want. Fan brushes nice for blending. Some smaller detail brushes, a liner brush because if you want to do hair or something, grass, whatever, liner brush is very important. And this one here is my particular favorite, kind of my my secret weapon, the angle brush. Now it's technically an angle shader and people use it mostly for shading, but I see it to be a blade and I'm a warrior with this angle brush. That's how I get into all the fine little areas. Anyway, come check this out. So, of course, you're going to be able to clean your paints after you're done with them. You want to clean your brushes, so that's why you need this here, a silicoil jar. You want to take a look inside this. Silicoil jars are really cool because essentially what you do, this isn't water by the way, this is Gamsol, which we'll get to that later, but you fill it up with a paint solvent, and then once you do that, every time you're done painting, you rub it on top of the coil that's in here, and after a while, all of the paint pigment that you've used is going to sink down to the bottom of the coil, and you'll be able to take the coil out, and what remains will be your turret. And that is a combination of every single color that you've used, and it will create a gray. And you can scrape that gray out, so you never have to waste paint. I hate wasting paint. Don't do it. Oil paint's expensive. You'll figure that one out. Anyway, so that brings me, of course, to Gamsol. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of solvents. You can use turpentine, which smells bad. That's what the old masters use. Of course, you can use odorless mineral spirits. There's different. I wouldn't recommend anything that, especially if you're painting inside, has heavy fumes. It smells bad. And I mean, I like to use some of that stuff. It really depends on what you want to do. But for now, we're just gonna start with the basic stuff. Get Gamsol. It's cheap. It's fine. And then that brings me to the gesso. Now you'll see here we have some canvases. Most canvases that you buy at the store are already going to be primed, so you don't have to worry too much about the gesso. But sometimes it's nice because if you look at them close up, you'll see there's always a tooth to the canvases that you get there, and I kind of like to have my surface a little bit more smooth. So it's always nice to put some more gesso on there. Get a brush like this and just add an extra layer. And then, you can also, you can oil paint on anything. Just throw some gesso down and on anything, oil paint on it. Why the hell not? And then, the old masters, what they would do is they sized their canvases, which were usually raw linen, with rabbit skin glue. Actual rabbit skin. I'm not making this shit up. I do it actually often. It's one of my favorite ways to paint. Rabbit skin glue and then oil ground. But we'll get to that later on. You guys are still just starting out, so gesso's fine. Anyway, I would also highly recommend, I insist that you get palette knives as well because don't get me started on how terrible acrylic paint is, but with oil paint, you actually have to mix colors, all right? And so that brings me, of course, here to my palette. Now, a lot of times, I mean, for instance, I do this, you see Bob Ross doing this, people will use wooden palettes, and wooden palettes are cool, you know, especially if you're plein air painting or going out somewhere and painting in a place where, you know, you don't want to bring a glass palette, and that's fine, but at the same time, when you start out, you really need to get an understanding for how paint mixes. Oil paint, it's so important. Color mixing is everything. And so, right here, you just get a glass palette. You can get these pretty much anywhere. And once you get that, I'm giving you your first quest, okay? Number 1 quest, you're level 1, you're starting out. I want you to try this out right here. Okay, so here we have 4 different colors, all providing the colors that I told you to do earlier. We have Indian yellow. Now, Indian yellow is transparent, okay? And that's important because when we're creating black, we want to mostly use transparent colors because that gives it depth. When you see like a disgusting Mars black, which by the way, I told you not, I didn't tell you to get Mars black because black straight out of the tube is disgusting. It's going to desaturate your colors. We're creating what's called a chromatic black. So, Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, phthalo blue. That is the key to really getting a good black, and then a touch of cad red just to, you know, kind of tone it down a little bit, sometimes give some warmth. It depends, but like I'm talking about color mixing, that's some serious shit. If you're gonna mix colors, you're gonna need to do it over and over and over again. You're gonna need to do it so many times, you're gonna hate it, but you need to have an understanding for the paint because this is something, it's like a language. You need to learn to speak it. So, anyway, with these 4 colors, try please to create this right here, all right? This is your first assignment. So with these colors, create a black. And then once you create a black, I want you to take some titanium white. And I want you to create 3 different shades. 1 darker, 1 medium, and 1 lighter with your titanium white. Not too difficult, right? So, go for it. Quest number 1. If you complete it, send me the image. You'll get your experience. Love you so much. See you next time. Hello, my name is Brooks Crossover, and I'm an oil painter. So today is going to be our 2nd lesson, and we're going to get into probably one of the best things about oil painting, something that you absolutely can try to do with acrylic painting or watercolor or really any other kind of painting, but you'll never really be able to do. And that is, of course, shading. Now, let's get to it. You'll have to excuse some of this background noise taking place. This is where I paint, and it's kind of a little bit outside if you can't tell. Okay, so for lesson 2, we're gonna need the following items. Your toned surface, and then I'm gonna ask that you get your titanium white, your phthalo blue, a cute little flat brush here, this is size 6, an angle shader, my baby. Let's see, what size is this right here? A 1/2 angle shader, and then we have this sweet, adorable little fan brush. This is going to be the first time that we're using the fan brush, and those are great for shading. A palette knife for mixing, because later on, there's alizarin crimson and Indian yellow might get a little bit of use if you guys want to get bold, but for now, let's get started. Now you see what I've done here is I've toned it, and it's still kind of wet. And that's okay because that can kind of work its way into the painting. The reason I do that is because you can see the relativity of the color and tone. So for instance, let's say that you want to take a white, you know. I put some white right there. It's barely even noticeable over top of the color that it already is. I mean, you know, you can tell it's wet, you can tell that that's also white. But, for instance, if you were to put some white right here, you know, you can really see that white pop. But I would recommend, please, 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 make that black like I showed you how to do last time. Find the black that's your chromatic black, the black that you like, make the lightest tone, and then tone your surface. Whatever surface, it's fine, it doesn't matter. I want to paint a sphere. And the reason I want to do a sphere is because I think it's a great way to show light and depth while keeping it simple and not too complicated. And also, spheres are very, very easy to do. So let me show you something really quickly. The silicone jar that I asked you to get, mine is a little bit messy, but once you get it, it has a lid to it, right? And this is really cool. This is something that I like to do, and you can do it with pretty much any kind of circular shape, is use it almost sort of like a stamp, all right? So I'm just going to take some phthalo blue and kind of just imagine that it's a stamp. I'm just loading the surface up. So essentially what I've done is I've created a stamp. Now this is kind of a fun little trick that I've made up. I mean, there's lots of those and you'll learn those in the days to come. We're just gonna plop this one right in the middle, okay? Because this is an actual painting. We don't have to worry about composition. This is just an exercise, okay? So I'm plopping this right here in the middle, giving it a little bit of a twisty spin like so, and then picking it up. Now you can see it looks like maybe I moved it around a little bit too much. You can kind of just mess around with it until you get it to be the shape that you like. Let's get a little bit here. All right, so an easy circle. There's a lot of different ways to make circles. I mean, you can use a compass if you want to, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? This is just an exercise. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my handy dandy angle shader like I showed you guys before, get some more phthalo blue, and I'm just gonna put that right here. Although I would ask that you guys use your glass palette that I told you to get. So I'm gonna load my brush up with a pretty good amount of phthalo blue. Now phthalo blue is a very powerful color, but the reason that I'm loading it up and making it so heavy is because I want you guys to use too much paint. Until you use too much, you don't really know what enough is as far as, you know, your language in painting. So you see the way that I'm laying this down? It's mixing with the paint that's already there. So you're going to be able to kind of get a good feel for what mixing wet paint into other wet paint feels like. All right. And I'm kind of just giving this the basic going ahead. Sometimes you want to keep working the circle until you get it right. And like I said, this is just an exercise, so it doesn't have to be perfect. As you can see, my circle is anything but perfect. It's kind of a little bit wompity-flompity, but that's okay, you know. I'll have you know I am painting with one hand and holding a phone with the other hand, so it is not exactly that easy. Anyway, so see what I'm doing here is I'm kind of allowing some of this up here, the light, to remain. Because that's where I want my light source to be. Okay. So, letting this light remain here. I'm going to go back. Now I want to get my little flat brush that I showed you before. Get some more phthalo blue on it. Really come in here. Start to add some more darkness to it, create more depth down here. Like so. Alright, so mess around with it. See how I'm kind of blending just with this for now? That's alright. And like I said, remember, I'm using a lot of paint. It's okay to use a lot of paint because it feels scary at first, and it's not drawing. You're not drawing, okay? A lot of the times when people are using acrylic paint, watercolors, or anything, you know, they're just getting a little bit of paint, they're plopping it on the surface, and they're almost treating it like a colored pencil, you know? They're drawing with paint. That's not what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to actually paint. I want the painting to be a painting. I don't want it to be a drawing. So, there we go here. All right. That's looking just about fine for now. All right. Now the next thing that I want to do is get some of this sweet handy dandy titanium white. Well, going to plop some of that down there. Kind of just rub off this little flat brush. It's good to have nice little surfaces to rub things on. I like to use my clothing, you know. It really depends. Whatever is comfortable for you guys. I want you guys to watch my process and make your own is important, because the more that you paint and the more you experiment with this medium, the more that you're going to discover you love to do or you hate to do, and that's fine. For now, I'm just going to show you this. So, putting down some of this white here, like so. Circling that around this way. Alright, time for our handy dandy little fan brush to come in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just with, there we go, the shadows on the outside. And as you can see, that was just one big old swoop right there. Dip a little bit more into the phthalo blue, darken it up just a tad. But fan brushes are cool because the way they work, the bristles are all very spread far apart. So you get an interesting kind of look. Now, as you can see, I got a little bit of paint coming off here. That's okay. That's one of the reasons why I toned the background. You can make very easy little corrections, like so, if you want to. But like I said, just an exercise. Does not have to be perfect. This kind of reminds me of that episode of SpongeBob where he draws an entire like Vitruvian man just to be able to get one circle. There's lots of different ways of making circles. So like I said, whatever's most comfortable for you. Now I'm rubbing off the paint that's currently on here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did for the outside, the shadows, but I'm going to do it with, there we go. And so I'm just doing this very, very quickly. I expect for the ones that you guys are going to be doing, you're going to spend a lot longer on it, and I'm hoping that it's going to be a lot better than this, okay? I'm just showing you the very basics of it. So, I'm just going to keep going in. Just develop where that light is. So my camera cut off there for a second and I'm still learning. You guys are gonna have to excuse me, but essentially what I did was we moved forward a little bit. I told you that we wanted to use the alizarin crimson a little bit later on, and right now I loaded that into my fan brush and I essentially put it down the same place that I did the phthalo blue before, but I'm just using it to really add some deep shadow. It's almost a black now, right onto that. And then what I was going to explain is that I sometimes spin the canvas around because I find that it's easier for me to do certain things with a brush that I can't do in some angles compared to if I were to just have it, you know, right ways up the entire time. So what I've done here is I've moved it around. See how I'm switching it around like so. There we go again. So that is okay to do, as long as you're not painting something from life, and we can go through painting things from life later on. And you know what? It's okay to do it if you're painting from life too, but you're gonna have to turn your entire head, you know, but we'll get into that later. Anyway, so now we've gotten to this point here. I'm gonna go ahead and start to, I'm gonna wipe off the excess paint that I got going on here. Maybe get a little bit more of this phthalo blue. And let's kind of mix the shadow into it. You know, I showed you how we were blending before. Let's do the same thing. Just blend that on in there, right back and forth, like so. And when you're using a fan brush, it's important to rub off the excess paint on it, or else you're gonna start to get all muddy. We don't wanna get muddy while we're oil painting. That is one of the easiest things to do, is to get muddy. And that's because, you know, unlike acrylic paint and other paints, oil paint stays wet. So the entire time that you're working on it, that paint is just ready to smudge into the other tones and the other colors. And if that happens, you're gonna get a real gross sort of brown. And some people want that. That could be what you're going for. But if it's not intentional, it's just gonna end up looking kind of gross. We don't want the paintings to look gross. Or maybe we do, but, you know, that's up to you. For now, we're just doing an exercise. So remember, like I said, don't get frustrated. It's okay if your circle's not turning out perfect. I mean, you can look at mine. Mine is far from perfect, but right now you can just see that we're getting the shading in. Okay. All right, now get a little bit more white on there. Get the paint off of this flat here. Touch on some more titanium white. And let's really just put a nice dollop on there so we can really pop that. Look at that highlight right there. Now, this is pretty simple, right? It's just a nice simple little highlight, but maybe let's say we want to, what if we wanted there to be another sort of light maybe coming from over here? So, and that's the case, I'm gonna rub off the majority. I don't want the white to be too thick. I kind of want there to be like, still a little bit of white left on the brush. Not too thick though. So with a little bit of white left on the brush, say we want a light right here, just gonna plop that in right there. Okay, let's rub it in like so. And with our handy dandy fan brush here, make sure there's no paint on that. Kind of just blend in this light so that it's a nice, almost just very basic glow. Like that. Very basic glow happening there. And so you can almost barely even see that it's there. Might want to get just a little bit more white. And what I'm doing here is I'm just continuing with that glow, blending it out and blending it in so that we just have this sweet little soft caterpillar going on. And see how I'm constantly removing paint from the fan brush so that it's easier to blend. Alright, so now we've got this glow here. Take some titanium white again. We can use the fan brush for this if you want to. You can use a smaller brush too if you want. Whatever you're more comfortable with. I'm just going to go ahead with the fan brush. And then I'm going to add in this nice little dollop of light right on top. So the fact that we put in that glow earlier, that really helps that light pop. So now we've got a separate light source, and you can really do as many of these as you want. I mean, obviously this is imagined light, so it's not actually there, but let's say we wanted another light happening right along the edge here. Sometimes if there's light coming from a different place in the room, then it'll hit the edge like so. And you can see I kind of got rid of some of this shadow, but that's okay because we can always take dark color, go back in, fix it if we need to. I love oil paint because oil paint is a very, very forgiving medium. All right, so kind of do the same thing maybe a little bit over here, where hit it with a little bit more of this soft light going on. Now, I like where we're kind of going with it. I'm gonna add a couple of more lights in there, so we're gonna go into fast time speed right now. Okay, so see what I'm doing now? So I'm kind of just messing around with it a little bit. I mean, things aren't looking perfect here, but that's okay. And so, yeah. Hello. No, I'm doing a little like painting exercise. I'm gonna post on. That was my good friend Sherdley's, who is nice enough to let me be painting at his place right now. All right. And so like I said, I'm just kind of messing around here, giving it, obviously none of these lights are really existing. I'm just, like I showed you before, putting in little cute highlights and lowlights, and I'm adding them, removing them, just really having a good time with it, you know. Now I want to do something a little bit drastic, okay? So right now, so far, we have phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and titanium white here. But remember, before I had you grab that Indian yellow? So now we're going to take this Indian yellow and let's mix it in with some of this titanium white. And I don't have my glass palette. You guys should be using your glass palettes, by the way. I mean, don't do the bad mistakes that I make. And I've developed some bad habits. I'm going to try to get you guys not to have these bad habits. But I understand if you develop them, everyone has their own way of doing things. My way is just kind of terribly messy. So now what I'm doing is I'm mixing some of this alizarin crimson with titanium white and Indian yellow. And it's going to make a fun sort of off orange. So it's not a very intensely chromatic orange, but that's okay. I don't really want it to be. I want it just to have a nice sort of warmth to it, because everything else going on here is kind of cool, you see? So now, let's say that we maybe have a different, warmer light source coming from here. So, it's kind of the same way we added the highlights in before, but we're gonna go in with this. Check that out. Now we got some more warm stuff coming in, warm stuff happening. That's looking nice. And I know that a lot of you guys are probably getting a little bit muddy right now with what you're doing, especially if you're using a lot of paint, but that's okay because it's all right. This is just an exercise, and you're going to get very, very muddy at first. That's just the way it goes. And eventually, the more that you do it, it's like a language you're learning, and the better you get at speaking it, the easier it's going to be to keep things from getting muddy. So I'm just going through, popping that fun little color all around. Got some going here, maybe a little bit here. All right, and well, you know what? Why don't we put just a tiny little bit at the bottom too? There we go. And so now, gotta go ahead and get rid of the paint that's on this, and kind of just blend it together. Fast mode. Here we go. Alright, now you guys are gonna have to excuse me because unfortunately I'm just apparently really bad at pretending to I'm sorry, not pretending, but trying to pay attention and paint at the same time. So yes, my sphere, look how fucking terrible the sphere is. It's entirely, it's not even a sphere, it's more like a wompy egg that has been smashed in the by gravity. But anyway, so yes, like I said, this is just an exercise, and I'm just messing around. You know, I really want you guys to go in and explore. And I know I did this in, you know, just like 10 minutes, but at the same time, you can go in and do this exercise over and over and over again, because each time you're going to create different lights, different. It's going to be hit by you know, lights from here or here or here. You can put highlights different places. You know, it's really just all about finding your language of shading. So this was simple enough. You know, you're just shading from one side down here, putting in a couple little highlights in. But yeah, go ahead and for me repeat this exercise. You know, maybe even like fill up an entire thing with a bunch of tiny different little balls, and eventually it's going to come so naturally to you that you're going to be so gosh dang good at painting balls, you're not going to know what to do with yourself. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and just completely destroy that, because remember, don't get precious with things, especially just exercises. If you want to keep your cute little ball, you're proud of your shaded sphere, that's okay. That's fine. You can keep it. But At the same time, remember, this is just an exercise and we're gonna start doing way more complicated things soon enough, so peace. Hello, my name is Brooks Kosover and I'm an oil painter. Now today, I'm gonna work on a commission that I have to do. Actually, it's a pet portrait. So it's not gonna be something that you can kind of paint along with, unfortunately. But I wanted to talk you through my process a little bit. It's gonna be a quick sort of impressionistic piece, and I just wanna let you know kind of the sort of things that I do when I paint, and watch it, learn from it if you will. Here we go. So for today's lesson, we're going to be painting a dog. Now, this is a commission that I have. I do a lot of pet portrait commissions, and it's important always to have your reference photo, but don't be in love with your reference photo, because the reference photo should be just that, a reference, and you should let the painting have a life of its own. For instance, I want to, with a very simple palette, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, Indian yellow, and cad red light, or I'm sorry, this is just cad red medium, and of course titanium white. I want to be able to make this dog come to life and put this dog in a place. So based on the perspective that you can see here, it seems as though we're kind of looking from above. So maybe we have a horizon line about here, and we can place a sky right about here. And perspective is important. So when you're looking at a dog from above, the perspective is going to suggest that the horizon line is higher. Now, I'm gonna teach you guys how to paint, understand oil, okay? I'm not gonna teach you how to draw. If you wanna learn how to draw, you gotta do that on your own. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be here to teach you how to draw. But if you wanna learn how to paint, you came to the right place. So today, I want to put in a background, the horizon, a sky, a nice sort of dark sky back there, and then bring it down into darkness here, and have the dog's face really pop. So I kind of sketched out this dog, and this is a rough sketch. You can let the painting do most of the talking for you, but what's important is to remember this. When you're painting, you work from dark to light and back to front. So let's go ahead and get started on the sky. Now, I'm just gonna use this little fan brush for the most of the background. Where to start, we got some alizarin crimson. Take some alizarin crimson and mix that with some titanium white, and we're gonna get this nice, cool, sort of pinkish tone, all right? Now, earlier on when you're working, it's okay to mix your paint with a little bit of odorless mineral spirits or Gamsol. Well, it's a little bit dirty, right? But that's okay, because if you work properly and just give a little bit of this here to the brush, it's not gonna come off too much in the color. It looks dirty in there, but if you use it properly, it's not even gonna be that big of a deal. So, go ahead, start doing the background. And so what this what this Gamsol does is it kind of helps your paint have a bit of flow to it. It flows quicker. And it moves easier across the surface. See? It'll help give that paint a little bit of flow that you need to just help it glide across the surface. Now you can really use any kind of brush for doing this background and filling it in. I've chosen the fan brush just because we're going to be doing a little bit of blending in a sec. Alright, so now I have this nice sort of pink horizon, this nice sky going on back here behind the dog. But what might give it a little bit of a sky feeling is if we turn it slightly darker towards the top and create a linear gradient, a horizontal linear gradient. So I'm going to take some more alizarin crimson like this and sort of bring it over here on the top. Sort of make a nice linear sort of horizon with some alizarin crimson. So now it feels as though there's a little bit more depth in the background because there's a darkness to the top. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start to bring in the foreground, okay? So for that, I'm just going to go straight up phthalo blue, but I think I want to use a little bit of a bigger brush so that we can cover more surface quicker. So I'm going to use this flat It's a size 10 flat. Dip a little bit more into this Gamsol. Some phthalo blue on that. And let's get right to it. I'm going to bring this all the way up, right about up to here. You can see up towards where that horizon is, but don't go all the way up because we're going to make sure to define the difference between the foreground and the background soon enough. But for now, I'm just lying in that phthalo blue. All in. Okay, nice there. Now, gotta go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, so now we have the background and we have the foreground. Now let's merge them together, okay? Let's define this foreground so that it feels like it's an actual space. Now in order to do that, take a liner brush and go in with this phthalo blue here. And let's make some grass. So, I'm just gonna take this liner brush and whoop, check that out. We got some grass coming in here. So, let's just go ahead and do that, the whole background. Yep. Okay, so now we've kind of got him in this dark field of grass with a nice cool red sort of sunset happening back here. Now let's go ahead and get started on painting this actual dog. Okay, so now what I've done here is really just using phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. I've created a nice sort of range of tones here. Now, if you go ahead and take a look at my reference photo, you see a cute little doggy. But I want to keep it simple. And I want to break it into 4 different tones, okay? A dark tone, a slightly dark tone, a medium tone, a lighter tone, and then a highlight. And this is all just for the dark brown part of his hair, okay? This isn't even the white hair yet. We're not going to get there. We're going to start just on the darks and pull it into the sort of lighter darks, okay? We're looking at the lighter dark highlights. Now, one thing I like to do when I start a portrait, a pet portrait or a regular person portrait, is I like to start with the eyes because I feel like that really gives some life to the portrait and it kind of inspires you to want to go on with it, you know? Like as soon as a portrait starts to take life, then you feel a relationship with it and you feel like, okay, now I want to continue on. Now I want to find out who this person is. So we're gonna start with the eyes. Go ahead and get my darkest dark here. Just gonna go in. I've already sort of basically sketched out where the eyes are. I'm just gonna lie down this nice dark tone. Just go ahead and lie that down there. And if you're working on your own sort of pet portrait with me, that's great. If you're just watching the video just to learn, that's also great. Okay, lie down one there, the dark tone. And once again, that's a mixture of phthalo blue and alizarin crimson with titanium white toned all the way up. And I'm using a nice little baby flat brush here. Although you can choose whatever brush you feel like works best for you. You don't necessarily have to follow what I'm doing, but this is just to kind of help you along. Okay, so now I've placed the dark in there. The next thing I want to do, if you take a look, you can see some highlights going on in the eyes. So, let's go ahead and give these irises a little bit of warmth before we start to really push the highlights. So I'm going to tap into my second to lightest shade here. Like that. A bit lighter. Now I'm just going to give the iris a fun little dollop. Like so. Work that in there. So the other side as well. There we go. So now he's got a little bit of iris going on. Now what do you say we actually go ahead and add in a highlight? Now if you remember before, when I showed you guys when we were doing the ball, you want to start with just sort of a little bit of a glow for the highlight, okay? Not the actual light yet. So I'm going to go ahead and put a bit of a glow there. Glow there. Nice little bit of glow here. So now the eyes have some glow to it. And then we can go in, get some actual white, and pop that highlight right in the middle. So, like so. Okay. Now if you look, you can see there isn't really a highlight on the left side, but I'm gonna go ahead and put one anyway because I want the painting to be my painting. It doesn't have to be married to the reference photo, okay? It's my own artistic choice to put a highlight in both eyes. It's my style, it's what I like to do. You can do things the way you want to do. That's the beauty of painting. Make it your own. Okay, so now we have the eyes in there. It's looking like this dog has got a little bit more life to it. So, let's start to continue with the darks. And I'm thinking the next dark part we can do is behind the ear right there. So, I can even use the same brush. Go ahead and wash it off a little bit. And get some of this dark again. I go in, my reference photo. Always make sure to check your reference photo, even if you're not going to be married to it entirely. Go ahead and place the darks down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and just line in the darkest parts, and then I'll see you once I'm done with that. Alright, so now I've kind of lined in what I thought were the darkest tones on the dog. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to move from the darkest to slightly lighter. So let's find some of the areas that are not the darkest like that, but slightly lighter like this one. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to fill in those areas. This. And I know you guys aren't going to be painting the exact same painting that I am, so this is just a little bit of me explaining some basic painting principles. So, as you can see, I'm going slightly lighter tone now. So now I'm going to go ahead and fill in that area. I'll come back once I put in those tones as well. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and added in not the darkest and the second darkest. And this isn't a step-by-step, like I'm not showing you guys how I'm going to do every single small bit because I'm not making this video to show you how to paint a dog. I'm showing you the basic principles of how you move from the background to the foreground and from the dark to the light. That's the way I'm teaching you. So we've done the background, or at least the basic background for now, and then we've done our darkest and our second darkest. So now let's go ahead and do the third darkest, or the third lightest, however you want to say it. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in that. And right now we're just working on the dark tones of the dog. We haven't even started the white parts yet. So right now I'm going to do the third lightest part of the dark part of the fur. And then I'll show you in a second. Here we go. Alright, so now I have started to add in As you can see, the third to darkest tones in there. This is just the darks. So things are starting to have a little bit more depth now. And then now, let's move to the lightest of the dark. Here we go. Okay, so now the third, fourth, or the... Alright, so now I've laid down all 4 tones, which were the ones I wanted to use for the dark part of his fur. And now, it's time to do the light. So to do the light, I'm going to use the exact same tones, but I'm going to put titanium white into each of them, a big thick dollop, so that now I can use these exact same tones and lighten them all up to the shade that it needs to be to do the whites. So here we go. Alright, and so what you'll notice is that instead of making 4 different tones like I did for the dark, there's you can kind of see that there's less variation. There's less variation in the white. So I only made 3. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to start with the darkest of the whites and then move to the light. So let's do the darkest of the white. Okay, so I put the darkest of the white. Now to put the second whitest of the white, second darkest of the white, whatever you want to call it. So the second shade up. We're going to do that. Let's go. Alright, now I started to add in the second lightest. Let's go ahead and add in the full lightest, and then we can always pull highlights and push back shadows later on, but these are just the basic layers that I'm putting in. Just wanted to give you guys an idea from how I do it, my process. Alright, so now I've gone ahead and added in the lightest of the lights, and we've got a nice sort of cool looking color palette now, where everything's in a range of a cool red to a deep, nice, cool blue. So what would be fun and sort of pop things out a little bit is to add some light of a different color. So overall, I would say the general tone of this is red and blue, or purple. So the complementary color, which would pop against it, is yellow. So in order to use a complementary color against purple, we need yellow to pop it. So I've got some Indian yellow, and I'm going to mix that with titanium white. And when I do that, I'm going to use that to really pop out some of these highlights. So now we've got this nice yellow sort of poppy, which is good, but we have certain areas like this dark, it's a little bit too intense. It needs something to blend into it, something that can marry it to the lighter tones that are happening all around it. So now we're going to go back in with some more alizarin crimson, but just alizarin crimson, so that we can kind of push in the darkest darks into the light. Let's go. Alright, so now I've gone ahead and laid down the yellow highlights. We kind of made some of this, the darkest darks blend in a little bit better with the alizarin crimson. Now, I think it would add a whole new level of interest if I went ahead and made some bluish highlights as well. So we're going to take titanium white and phthalo blue and mix that and create a blue highlight to create this beautiful, radiant sort of chromatic blue-white that will pop. Let's get it. Okay. So now I've added in some nice cool blue highlights into it, and you can see I'm really laying down the paint thick, and this is the first time I'm doing it. It's a wet on wet technique, but I think I could even deepen some of the darks in there. So I'm going to go in one more time and try to push in some of those darks with some more just straight up phthalo blue. Alright, and so you see that I've strayed pretty far away from the reference image. I mean, now I have this nice sort of glowing, expressive dog here. And I mean, the light probably doesn't look so good on my phone, but you see it in person, it looks not so bad. But what I want to do to kind of tie in the image, the background with the dog, is I want to go ahead and start putting some grass coming up in front of the dog in the foreground. So before I do that, I want to do some shadows. So I'm going to show you how to do one. Now if you look here, we have this, which is our natural shadow going on, and this is where the light is, right? So if we want to make a shadow for maybe, you know, say a blade of grass like I want to do there, just reach in, some dark, a little bit of phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. I'm going to go ahead and create this blade of grass shadow, just like that. So now you can see I'm bringing the shadow from the darkest part right to the edge of where the highlight is, like so. And then I'm going to get a little bit of a lighter tone here. I'm going to start to bring it into the highlight as well. But you'll see what I'm doing here in the highlight is I want to make sure it's darker than the highlight, but not as dark as the shadow that's already in the other shadow. So that way, when you look at it, blend it out a bit. You can see. On that edge a little bit. You can see it starts to vary from where the shadow is to where the highlight is. So now I'm going to work that in a little bit. I'm going to do a couple more of those. Okay, so now I've made some shadows down here for where the grass is going to be. And you can see these are expressive, they're not realistic. I'm just doing this exercise to try to help you understand working from back to front and dark to light. A little bit about tonal values and how you can use them to your advantage. So now I want to add in a foreground, some grass coming up for these shadows to sort of make sense. To do that, I'm just going to start with phthalo blue and just lie down with a big old angle brush, some huge blades of phthalo blue going through. Let's do it. Okay, so see what I did with my angle brush as I went in and I started to make blades of grass come up like so. But what you'll notice is that it's getting into some of this lighter shadow that I put down here on the dog. So it's kind of creating this illuminated blue glow. It's starting to dip in a little bit to these colors, which is okay, because it gives it this nice sort of gestalt. It kind of makes sense when you see it, but in order to really get these blades of grass to come forward into the foreground, we're going to use some of this yellow, Indian yellow and titanium white that we used before, because these blue marks that we laid down, this was really just the base. I want you to do this. I want you to take this yellow here and use these blue marks that you put down, kind of just trace over them and create blades of grass. And just do that for all the different blades of grass. Okay, so now I've started to bring some of the green grass into the front, as you can see. But what I think would really pull the piece together is if I started to do some strands of red grass back here, kind of pull all the colors and everything together. It makes a little bit more sense. I'm going to do that next. Okay, so now that we've got this sort of red grass coming on in the background, can't really see it because of the lighting, but it's really starting to make everything feel full. You know, everything's starting to, it's one painting all married together on the surface. The picture plane starting to make sense. But because of how bright the dog is here, I think for the finishing touch, we could really pop out some intense greens coming in the front. Now I know that I'm working wet on wet, so it's kind of difficult if you guys are just starting out to kind of work with this much paint, because this is some very thick paint. But this is just something that I want to do for you to kind of understand. This is just a quick painting I'm doing. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added the yellowish green off the top. This is a nice, thick, sort of impressionistic looking puppy that I've done here. It's a quick one, you know. It's just, I wanted this to be a little bit about me explaining how things should be done. If you take anything from this lesson, it's that you need to paint from the back to the front and from the dark to the light. Mix your different tones, and remember, it doesn't have to look exactly like the reference photo. In fact, I don't think it should. A painting should be its own thing. It doesn't have to be exactly like a photo. So, there we have it. Quick little cute doggy there in the grass.